I never imagined that 12 words could undo a lifetime of love. They arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning, glowing on my phone screen while I sat at the kitchen table, coffee cooling beside me. Don't expect me to take care of you when you're old. I have my own life and family. I read it twice. Then again. My hands didn't shake. Not yet. At 71, I had learned that shock doesn't always scream. Sometimes it goes silent. My name is Margaret Wilson, and for over 3 decades, I believed I had done everything right. My late husband, Alan, and I built our life brick by brick in a modest neighborhood outside Seattle. We weren't rich, but we were careful. Mortgage paid early. Retirement planned meticulously. Savings protected like something sacred. When Alan passed suddenly 6 years ago, everything we had worked for landed in my hands: our home, his pension, and investments meant to carry me through old age with dignity. And one day, to leave something meaningful behind. Our son, Daniel, was the center of our world. I raised him to be kind, responsible, independent. Or at least I thought I did. He visited on holidays. Brought his wife, Claire. Let the grandchildren run through my halls. Sunday dinners. Birthday cakes. Smiles for photos. I helped when they asked, school fees here, a temporary emergency there. I told myself that was what mothers did. I never questioned it. The first crack appeared months earlier, when Daniel called asking for $18,000. He said Claire's father needed urgent medical care insurance wouldn't cover. I didn't hesitate. Family doesn't hesitate. But weeks later, when I gently asked Claire how her father was recovering, she blinked at me like I'd spoken another language. Recovering from what? Daniel jumped in, quick and smooth. Mom misunderstood, he said. Preventive treatment. Something in his eyes didn't sit right. From that moment on, I noticed everything. How conversations drifted toward my finances. How often assisted living came up. How casually Daniel talked about when the house changes hands. I was healthy. I ran every morning. I cooked, cleaned, lived independently. Yet somehow, they spoke as if I were already halfway gone. Then came the text. I sat with it for nearly an hour, replaying every memory: first steps, school plays, the night Alan taught him how to drive. Had this resentment been growing quietly all along? I considered what response he expected. An apology. A plea. A reassurance that I would never be a burden. Instead, I typed 2 words. Okay. Nothing else. I set the phone down and felt something settle inside me, not anger, not grief, but clarity. That afternoon, I called my estate attorney. I need to update my will, I said calmly. There was a pause. Is everything all right, Margaret? For the first time in a long while, I replied, yes. What Daniel didn't know, what I didn't know yet, was that he still had access to one of my old accounts, set up years ago just in case. He saw the payment to my lawyer before I could explain anything. And when he realized what I was doing, he didn't call to ask how I felt. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask if I was hurt. He called to stop me. But by then, I had already decided something important. If my son didn't plan to stand by me in my old age, then I would make sure my future, and my legacy, stood on its own. And that was only the beginning. What Daniel didn't know was that I wasn't just changing a document. I was closing a door, and once he realized what was behind it, he would do anything to force it back open. Daniel called that same evening. I knew it was him before I even looked at the screen. Something in my chest tightened, not fear, not guilt, just expectation. "Mom," he said the moment I answered, skipping any greeting, "why did you meet with a lawyer?" So he'd already seen it. I took a breath, steadying myself. "Because I needed to." "You don't just need to change a will," he snapped. "That's something you discuss with family." Family? The word sounded different now. "I've discussed my needs," I replied calmly. "You made yours very clear." There was a pause. Then his tone shifted, cooler, sharper. "You're overreacting." That text was sent in frustration. "You know I didn't mean it like that." "Then how did you mean it, Daniel?" I asked. Silence. I pressed on. "You said you wouldn't take care of me. That you have your own life. I'm respecting that." "That doesn't mean you punish me," he said quickly. "You're being emotional." Emotional? The word landed like an insult wrapped in concern. "I am being practical," I said. "I'm planning my future." "You're 71, he scoffed. "You don't need to make drastic decisions." I smiled sadly. He was wrong about many things, but mostly about me. That night, I pulled out every financial record I had. Transfers. Checks. Notes scribbled in the margins. I hadn't meant to audit my own generosity, but once I started, I couldn't stop. 5,000 here. 8,000 there. Emergency. Temporary. Over 4 years, the total crossed $50,000. I stared at the number, my stomach hollow. How much of it had been real? How much had been assumed? The next morning, I returned to my attorney's office. "I want more than a will," I said. "I want protection." He explained my options carefully: living trusts, asset transfers, legal safeguards. I listened closely. For the first time, I wasn't thinking like a mother. I was thinking like someone who wanted to survive. By the end of the week, the Margaret Wilson Living Trust existed on paper. My house. My investments. Everything placed somewhere it couldn't be touched, challenged, or manipulated. Daniel's name was nowhere in it. I felt no joy signing those documents. Only resolve. When Daniel discovered the joint account was closed, he lost control. He showed up unannounced that Saturday morning. I was pruning roses when his car skidded into the driveway. He stormed toward me, face flushed, eyes wild. "What did you do?" he shouted. I didn't flinch. "Lower your voice." "That money was supposed to be mine," he said, stepping closer. "Dad worked his whole life for that." "And I worked my whole life beside him," I replied evenly. "It belongs to me." "You're ruining everything," he hissed. "We've been counting on it." Counting on it. There it was. Not love. Not concern. Expectation. "I'm not your retirement plan," I said quietly. His face hardened. "I can fight this. I can say you're not thinking clearly." I straightened, meeting his eyes. "Try." He froze. He hadn't expected resistance. I had records. Witnesses. Medical reports proving my competence. And something far more powerful than paperwork, I had truth. He left without another word, but I knew something had shifted. This wasn't over. That night, I locked my doors for the first time in years. Not because I was afraid of my son, but because I finally understood him. And understanding, I realized, was far more dangerous than denial. What Daniel didn't realize was that threatening me didn't scare me anymore. It only pushed me further, and the next move he made would cross a line neither of us could come back from. For a few days after Daniel stormed out of my garden, the silence was unsettling. No calls. No messages. No apologies. I told myself the quiet was good, that maybe he was thinking, cooling down, remembering who I was to him beyond money. I was wrong. The phone rang late one evening, long after dinner, when decent conversations usually end. I almost didn't answer. Something inside me already knew. "Mom," Daniel said, his voice oddly calm, "we need to talk. Claire and I are worried about you." That word again. Worried. "I'm fine," I replied. "If this is about the trust." "It's about your behavior," he interrupted. "You're acting paranoid. Closing accounts. Moving assets. Lawyers everywhere. That's not like you." I nearly laughed. "It is like me," I said slowly. "You just never noticed because I never said no before." He exhaled sharply. "You're being influenced. Someone's putting ideas in your head." "The only idea I'm acting on," I said, "is one you gave me." There was a pause. Then his voice dropped. "If you don't fix this," he said, "I'll have no choice but to involve legal professionals." I closed my eyes. "You're threatening me?" I asked. "I'm protecting you," he corrected quickly. "People your age are vulnerable. Judges understand that." That night, sleep never came. I lay staring at the ceiling, replaying his words over and over. Judges understand that. It wasn't concern, it was strategy. And suddenly, memories I had brushed aside felt different. The way he monitored my spending. The questions about my memory. The casual jokes about me forgetting things. The next morning, I called my attorney. "He's implying I'm incompetent," I said. There was no surprise in my lawyer's voice. "I expected that. We'll document everything." Within days, I was advised to take steps I never imagined needing against my own child: medical evaluations, notarized statements, witnesses to my decision-making capacity. I passed every assessment easily. But Daniel didn't stop. A letter arrived the following week, formal, typed, and cold. It stated that my son was concerned about my mental fitness and requested I submit to an independent psychological evaluation. I held the paper in my hands for a long time. This was no longer emotional manipulation. This was war. I agreed to the evaluation, not because I had to, but because I wanted the truth on record. 3 hours of testing later, the psychiatrist smiled kindly. "You're sharper than most people half your age," she said. Her report was airtight. Still, the stress took its toll. I began double-locking doors. Keeping copies of documents in multiple locations. Writing down every interaction. Every word spoken. Then Daniel escalated. One afternoon, I opened my door to find him standing there, with Claire beside him. Her smile was practiced. Polite. Dangerous. "We just want to talk," she said. "Here is fine," I replied, staying on the porch. Daniel crossed his arms. "Mom, this has gone too far. You're tearing the family apart." "No," I said. "I'm protecting myself." Claire's voice softened. "You don't need all that money. We're struggling. The kids. You drive a luxury SUV," I said quietly. "Your children attend private school." Her smile faltered. "This isn't about survival," I continued. "It's about entitlement." Daniel's patience snapped. "You're choosing money over family. I met his eyes. You chose money first. That was when he said it. If you don't reverse the trust, he said, voice low, don't expect to see your grandchildren again. The air left my lungs. There it was, the final weapon. I felt the pain, sharp and blinding. But beneath it, something stronger rose. Resolve. Get off my property, I said. They left furious. I stood there shaking, but not broken. That night, I realized something terrifying and liberating at the same time. My son was no longer fighting for love. He was fighting for control. And I would not give it to him. I thought threatening the courts was the worst thing Daniel could do. I was wrong. His next move would happen in front of a judge, and it would expose everything he'd been hiding for years. The official notice arrived on a Monday morning. Cream-colored envelope. Legal letterhead. Heavy paper that carried heavier meaning. Petition for mental capacity evaluation and financial review. Daniel had done it. He was formally asking the court to declare me mentally unfit. I didn't cry when I read it. I didn't scream or panic. Instead, I felt something cold and steady settle inside my chest. So this was how far he was willing to go. My attorney called within the hour. We are ready, he said. But I need you calm. Judges read emotion as instability. I'm calm, I replied. And I was. The weeks leading up to the hearing were exhausting. Every decision I'd made, every withdrawal, every legal signature, was dissected as if I were a suspect rather than a mother. I submitted medical records. Cognitive test results. Letters from my physician, my accountant, even neighbors who'd known me for decades. Daniel, meanwhile, built a story. A grieving widow. Isolated. Manipulated by professionals. Cutting off her only son without reason. On the morning of the hearing, I wore my best suit, not to impress anyone, but to remind myself who I was. A woman who had built a life, raised a child, and survived loss without collapsing. Daniel didn't look at me in the courtroom. Claire held his hand, her expression tight with confidence. Their attorney spoke first. Smooth. Polished. He painted Daniel as a concerned son and me as a confused elderly woman making erratic decisions. Then my attorney stood. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't dramatize. He presented facts. Clear. Clean. Unemotional. Medical evaluations showing full mental capacity. Financial records showing years of unexplained withdrawals requested by my son. Text messages, including the one Daniel wished he could erase. When the judge read it aloud, the room went quiet. Don't expect me to take care of you when you're old. I have my own life and family, she read slowly. She looked directly at Daniel. Did you send this message? Daniel shifted in his seat. Yes, but nothing, the judge said calmly. You expressed a boundary. Your mother respected it. She turned to me. Mrs. Wilson, are you aware of the consequences of your estate decisions? Yes, Your Honor. Were you pressured by anyone to make them? No. Do you wish to change anything today? No. The gavel struck. Petition denied. Just like that, months of manipulation collapsed. As we exited the courtroom, Daniel finally looked at me. His eyes weren't angry anymore. They were desperate. This isn't over, he whispered. My attorney stepped between us instantly. Do not speak to my client. Daniel backed away, but the damage was done. He had shown everyone who he was. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt grief. Not for the money. Not for the fight. But for the son I realized I had lost long before this courtroom ever existed. 2 weeks later, another envelope arrived, this one unexpected. It was from Daniel and Claire's mortgage company. They were behind on payments. Significantly behind. The picture snapped into focus with brutal clarity. The lifestyle. The urgency. The threats. They hadn't just wanted my money. They needed it. And they had built their future assuming my death would save them. That realization hurt more than the lawsuit ever could. I made one final decision. I hired an investigator, not to punish, but to understand. What he uncovered would change everything. I thought the courtroom was the end of the story. I was wrong. Because what I discovered next proved my son hadn't just planned for my money, he had already spent it. The investigator's report arrived in a plain folder, unremarkable on the outside. Inside was the truth. Page after page detailed what Daniel and Claire had been hiding beneath polished smiles and confident voices. Credit lines stacked on top of loans. Loans taken against expected inheritance. Luxury purchases justified by money that did not yet, and would never, exist. They had already spent my death. Vacations they couldn't afford. Private schools funded by debt. Cars leased on promises they assumed I wouldn't live long enough to dispute. Worst of all, there were emails, old ones, between Daniel and a financial advisor, asking hypothetical questions about accelerating estate access if a parent became difficult. The advisor had refused. But the intent was there, frozen in black and white. I sat quietly as I read, not angry, not shocked. Just tired. I understood now why Daniel had panicked when I closed the accounts. Why the courtroom loss had rattled him so deeply. Without my inheritance, the structure he built his life on had begun to collapse. I could have pressed charges. I could have exposed everything publicly. I could have destroyed him. But I didn't. Instead, I chose something harder. I sent one final letter. Not emotional. Not vengeful. Just final. I told Daniel I knew. About the loans. The assumptions. The plans. I told him my estate decisions were permanent and legally protected. I told him I would not rescue him from the consequences of choices he made while counting on my death. And then I wrote something unexpected. That if he ever came to me, not asking for money, not demanding forgiveness, but taking responsibility, truly apologizing without conditions, my door would be open to conversation. Not my finances. My heart. Weeks passed. Silence. Then winter came early that year. One December afternoon, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, 2 small figures rushed forward. My grandchildren. Behind them stood a woman I didn't recognize, court-appointed, polite, official. Daniel and Claire had lost their home. Bankruptcy filings had forced supervised family arrangements. And as part of that process, I had been granted limited visitation rights. Daniel stayed in the car. He never looked up. For 2 hours, I baked cookies with the children. We laughed. We read stories. We built a snowman in the yard while the first flakes fell softly around us. When they left, my granddaughter hugged me tightly. "Grandma," she whispered, "can we come back?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "Anytime." That night, I cried. Not from pain, but from release. The months that followed were quieter. Fuller. I ran every morning. Joined a book group. Volunteered at a children's hospital, the same one named in my trust. I watched scholarships I funded help students write letters filled with gratitude and hope. This was legacy. Not money passed to someone who felt entitled to it, but impact given where it was earned. Daniel never apologized. He sent one message months later. "You won." I never replied. Because this was never about winning. It was about choosing dignity over obligation. Boundaries over guilt. Self-respect over fear. I learned something late in life that I wish I had known sooner. Loving someone does not mean allowing them to use you. Being a parent does not require being a sacrifice forever. And family is not defined by blood, but by respect.